The Return. The transport shuttle descended through Luminara 7's atmospheric shields, and Kalen Thorne pressed his palm against the viewport, watching the station's spiraling architecture emerge from the cosmic dark. 3 years. It had been 3 years since he'd last stood on these platforms, since he'd breathed the ionized air that always carried a faint taste of ozone and starflowers. Nervous? Ambassador Reeve asked from the adjacent seat, her eyebrow raised with knowing amusement. Just remembering, Kalen replied, pulling his hand back. The docking procedure was flawless, as everything Azareth always was. When the airlock opened, a delegation of court officials awaited, their ceremonial robes shimmering with threads that seemed woven from captured light itself. But she wasn't among them. Of course she wouldn't be. Empress Sylvana Kerr didn't greet every returning diplomat personally. That would be beneath her station, beneath the crown she wore with such grace and burden. Yet Kalen found himself scanning the crowd anyway, his chest tight with a hope he'd tried for 3 years to bury. Ambassador Thorne, the lead official intoned, bowing with precise formality. Her Radiance, the Empress Sylvana Kerr, welcomes you back to Luminara 7. The treaty negotiations will commence tomorrow at the rising of the second sun. Kalen returned the bow, speaking the proper phrases, playing his part perfectly. But his mind was elsewhere, traveling back through memory to a different arrival, one where he'd been younger, less cynical, and she had been different too. The garden terraces had been empty that first night, everyone occupied with the opening ceremonies. He'd found her there by accident, standing among the night-blooming ceruleans, her crown set aside on a stone bench. Without it, she'd looked almost human, almost touchable. "You're not supposed to be here," she'd said, but her voice held no command, only curiosity. "Neither are you, I think," he'd replied. She'd smiled then, and something in the universe had shifted. That evening's state dinner was held in the Grand Celestial Hall, where walls of transparent crystal revealed the wheeling stars beyond. Kalen sat at the diplomatic table, making polite conversation, his attention fractured. Then the royal herald's voice rang out. Her Radiance, the Empress Sylvana Kerr. The hall fell silent. Kalen's breath caught. She entered like dawn breaking, her gown the color of nebulae, her crown a constellation of rare minerals that seemed to pulse with their own light. But it was her eyes that struck him, sweeping across the assembled guests with regal detachment until they found his. For one heartbeat, two, the careful mask slipped. He saw everything in that glance. Recognition, hurt, hunger, fury, longing. Then she looked away, ascending to her throne, and Kalen realized with devastating clarity that the past 3 years had changed nothing at all.
The confrontation. The summons came at midnight, delivered by a silent courier who pressed a luminescent card into Kalen's palm. The message was brief. The Eastern Observatory, come alone. Kalen's heart hammered as he made his way through the empty corridors, past sleeping guards and dormant light fixtures that glowed with residual energy. He knew these halls, had once walked them in secret, always careful, always aware that discovery would mean catastrophe for them both. The observatory door stood ajar, spilling soft silver light into the hallway. He stepped inside. Sylvana stood with her back to him, silhouetted against the vast window that showed the turning cosmos. She'd removed her crown. It sat on a nearby table like an abandoned weight, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders in waves that caught the starlight. "You came," she said, without turning, her voice carefully neutral. "I commanded it." "Did I?" She turned then, and the expression on her face made his chest ache. "I seem to recall a time when you came to me without commands, when you sought me out simply because you wanted to." Kalen took a step forward, then stopped, uncertain. "Sylvana, Empress Sylvana," she corrected sharply, though her eyes glistened. "We must maintain proper protocol, mustn't we, Ambassador? That's what you've been doing for 3 years, maintaining protocol, maintaining distance, maintaining silence." "It wasn't that simple." "Then explain it to me." Her voice cracked, the imperial composure shattering. "Explain how you vanished without a word, how you never sent a message, never responded to mine. Explain how someone can share what we shared and then simply disappear." She moved closer, her hands trembling at her sides. In the dim light, he could see the toll the years had taken. Faint shadows beneath her eyes, a tension in her jaw that spoke of sleepless nights and swallowed grief. "I waited," she whispered, and the words cut deeper than any accusation. "I made excuses for you. I told myself you were busy, that Earth's politics had consumed you, that you'd return when you could. I waited until waiting became pathetic, until my advisors began to notice, until I realized I was mourning someone who might never have cared at all. That's not true." Kaylin closed the distance between them, unable to maintain the careful separation any longer. "Sylvana, I care. But when I returned to Earth, they made it clear. Any connection to you was a liability. They monitored my communications, watched my every move. They said a relationship with you would compromise the treaty, endanger both our worlds. So you chose politics over me. I chose to protect you." His voice rose with desperate intensity. "Do you know what they threatened? Political sabotage, accusations of impropriety. They would have used our connection to undermine your authority, to paint you as compromised by human influence. And you made that choice for me." She turned away again, wrapping her arms around herself. In the dim light, he could see the toll the years had taken. Faint shadows beneath her eyes, a tension in her jaw that spoke of sleepless nights and swallowed grief. She turned back to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears, and the sight broke something in him. He reached for her, her hands trembling at her sides. In the dim light, he could see the toll the years had taken. Faint shadows beneath her eyes, a tension in her jaw that spoke of sleepless nights and swallowed grief. He closed the distance between them, unable to maintain the careful separation any longer. He reached for her shoulder, gently turning her to face him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, and the sight broke something in him. "You were everything," he said hoarsely. "You are everything, and that's precisely why I stayed away." Unraveling. The treaty negotiations began at dawn, held in the council chamber where representatives from both worlds gathered around a circular table inlaid with star maps. Kaylin and Sylvana sat opposite each other, their faces carefully neutral, speaking only through formal channels. But Ambassador Reeve noticed. She caught the way Kaylin's jaw tightened when Sylvana spoke, the way the Empress's fingers trembled slightly when shuffling documents, the electrical charge that seemed to fill the air whenever their eyes accidentally met. "You're distracted," Reeve murmured during a recess, offering Kaylin a crystalline cup of water. "I'm focused," he lied. Focused on her, maybe. Reeve's expression softened. "Whatever happened between you two, nothing happened." "Kaylin," she touched his arm gently, "I've been a diplomat for 20 years. I know what denial looks like." The afternoon session dragged on, debating trade routes and resource allocations, but Kaylin's attention kept fragmenting. He watched Sylvana's hands as she gestured, remembering how those same hands had once traced patterns on his skin in the darkness of the garden terraces. He listened to her voice laying out treaty terms, remembering how it had sounded whispering his name. When she called for a private consultation on a technical matter, both their advisors exchanged knowing glances. They met in an adjacent room, supposedly to review shipping lane coordinates. The door closed behind them and Sylvana immediately crossed to the far window, maintaining distance. "We can't keep doing this," she said to the glass. "Doing what?" "Pretending. It's exhausting." She turned and he saw the weariness in her eyes. "My advisor Oren asked me this morning if there was history between us. I denied it, of course, but I'm not sure he believed me." Kaylin moved closer, drawn by invisible threads. "What did you tell him?" "That you were simply another human diplomat, that all humans look somewhat similar to Asterith eyes." She laughed bitterly. "A transparent lie. No one looks like you, Kaylin. No one has ever made me feel—" She stopped, biting her lip. "Made you feel what?" he pressed gently. "Alive." The word emerged like a confession. "You made me feel alive. For those months, I wasn't just the Empress.
wasn't just the crown and the duty and the endless ceremonies. I was Sylvana, just Sylvana, a woman who laughed too loudly at your terrible jokes about Earth customs, who fell asleep on your shoulder watching meteor showers, who dared to imagine a future that didn't revolve around obligation. Kaylin's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally, muscle memory overriding caution. I imagined that future too, every day, every night. Then, why? Her voice broke. Why did you make it so easy to let go? It was never easy. He pulled her closer, his free hand rising to cup her face. Leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. Staying away has been torture, but I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. And now? Now I think I was a coward.
The rekindling. The next 3 days passed in a carefully choreographed dance of professional distance and stolen glances. But on the fourth evening, as the second sun dipped below Luminara 7's curved horizon, Kaylin found a pressed starflower slipped beneath his door, their old signal. His pulse quickened as he made his way through the winding passages to the ancient gardens, the preserved biodome that housed flora from a dozen worlds. The air here was thick with humidity and perfume, bioluminescent blooms casting pools of gentle light across stone pathways. She was waiting by the fountain where they'd first kissed, her silhouette outlined in blue-green luminescence. She'd abandoned all imperial trappings, no crown, no ceremonial robes, just a simple dress that moved like water around her form. "I wasn't sure you'd remember," she said softly as he approached. "I remember everything." He stopped an arm's length away, close enough to see the rapid flutter of her pulse at her throat. "The sound of your laugh when I tried to pronounce your full title. The way you hummed when you thought no one was listening. How you always tucked your hair behind your left ear when you were thinking. Stop." But she smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "You'll make me believe this could work." Maybe it could. They stood in the charged silence, the space between them both an ocean and a single breath. Then Sylvana closed the distance, her hand rising to rest against his chest where his heart thundered. "I've tried to forget you," she whispered. "I've tried to convince myself it was just infatuation, just the novelty of someone who saw me instead of the crown. But then you walk into a room and everything else disappears." Kaylin's arms circled her, drawing her fully against him. "I told myself you deserved better, someone of your own world, someone who could stand beside you without causing scandal. I don't want better." Her hand slid up to frame his face, her touch reverent. "I want you. Flawed, stubborn, impossibly human you." The kiss, when it came, felt like coming home and discovering a new world. Soft at first, tentative, relearning the shape and taste of each other. Then deeper, 3 years of longing compressed into a single moment of connection. They broke apart breathless, foreheads touching, and Sylvana laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the garden. "Come with me," she murmured, taking his hand. She led him deeper into the gardens, to a secluded alcove where climbing vines created a living canopy overhead. Ancient stone benches surrounded a small pool that reflected the stars visible through the dome's transparent ceiling. They sat close, her head finding its familiar place against his shoulder. His arm wrapped around her, holding her as though she might vanish if he loosened his grip. "Tell me about Earth. Tell me everything I missed." So he did. He described the changing seasons, the political upheavals, the small moments of beauty he had collected like treasures. And she told him about Luminara 7, about the challenges of ruling, about the loneliness that had become her constant companion. Hours passed unnoticed. At some point, she shifted to face him fully, her hands exploring the lines of his face as though memorizing them through touch. "If we do this," she said seriously, "if we try again, it won't be easy. The court will object. Earth's government will object.
We'll face opposition from every side. I know. They'll call me compromised. They'll say I'm weakened by emotion, unfit to rule. Let them. His hands tangled in her hair, drawing her closer. You're the strongest person I've ever known. She kissed him again, slower this time, savoring. When they finally drew apart, the first sun was beginning to rise, painting the dome in shades of amber and rose. "Stay with me," she whispered against his lips. "Not forever, not yet. Just stay a little longer." And as dawn broke over Luminara 7, Kalen held her close and whispered back, "As long as you'll have me."